everyone. Welcome to the Backstage Classical Career Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Katrina Stroud, and I'm a classical violinist who started playing at the age of 3. I graduated from the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings at Mercer University with my bachelor's in violin performance, and I'm pursuing my master's in music at the University of Michigan. In this series, I invite esteemed classical musicians onto the show and interview them to tell their stories and give advice to share with others and preserve their legacies. Today, I'm interviewing violist Victoria Chiang, someone whose help and advice I've really appreciated over the years. Victoria Chiang has performed as a soloist, recitalist, and a chamber musician across the world. Her most recent recording of the Stamets and Hofmeister viola concertos was released by Naxos to critical acclaim, and she has collaborated with many esteemed string quartets. Ms. Chiang is a founding member of the Aspen String Trio and is currently on the faculty of the Peabody Conservatory of Music, the Aspen Music Festival, and the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings. Her students hold significant positions in orchestras, string quartets, and on conservatory faculties across the United States and Europe. Ms. Chiang earned her Master of Music and Performer's Certificate from the Eastman School of Music and her Bachelor of Music degree from the Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Thank you so much for joining me today on my podcast. So, how did you start playing the viola and violin, and when did you switch full-time to viola?
I started when I was 5 in the Suzuki program that was in my school, and I would say I loved it from the beginning, and it was always something that I did. Maybe when I went to high school, I'm kind of a late bloomer, but when I went to high school, I started getting very much more seriously, having it be a big part of my life. Somehow the high school orchestra director at my school was also involved in Eastern Music Festival, and so he said that I should consider it. I did. I went there for several summers, and I don't know, it just was an eye-opener in terms of something that could occupy a big part of my life that I really loved. And I realized about practicing a lot more and taking my instrument much more seriously. So that kind of pushed me in a certain direction. And I went to Cincinnati Conservatory for my undergraduate degree, and in my last year, I played both violin and viola. But my degree is in violin. But I, sort of immediately loved the viola, and I took lessons with Misao Kawasaki viola at the same time that I was studying violin, and it was a very natural thing for me to play a bigger instrument. I just felt a lot more comfortable. My personality suited it better. I loved playing in a quartet in the inner voices, so it seemed like a natural next step for me.
Yeah, yeah. So you studied with both Dorothy DeLay and Heidi Castleman, who are some of the greatest viola and violin teachers in the country of this generation. How were they alike and how were they different from each other?
Well, I studied with Miss DeLay and her assistants, mostly her assistants, and some with Miss DeLay. And I would say going back, Heidi Castleman studied with Miss DeLay. So the whole Galamian system was very much embedded in both of their teaching. And what I would say I got from studying with Miss DeLay and her assistant is kind of a structure and an understanding of the pieces that are necessary to play the violin well. And I would say my time at Cincinnati was super hard for me because I was a super big fish in the little town that I grew up in New Jersey, and I really knew nothing. And maybe in this podcast, I can talk briefly about my whole family situation, but my parents were immigrants, and much of their way of life was just survival and getting their kids to have a better life. And so I just figured, oh, I like the violin, I'll do this. And then when I got to Cincinnati, it was a whole eye opener for me in terms of the standard and the deep information and complex education necessary to be great at your craft. And so it was very difficult for me. And I would say what Cincinnati offered me was the information or the structure that knew that I was lacking, and sort of the pieces that would need to be put together for myself. Not that it happened all there, but I started realizing what I needed to be doing. When I went to Heidi, I would say that a few spectacular things about Heidi. She has fantastic ears, and she also can explain every aspect that is a technical part of playing. But I would also say she's a wonderful musician, and she is someone who is capable of putting the whole person together. And I mean, I would sort of say I feel like one of the difficult things about playing an instrument well is that there's this physical aspect, there's this intellectual aspect of, thinking about music and what you wanna express, and then there's this emotional piece. So it kinda taps every part of your humanity,
Yeah.
and she is someone who I think is able to see a whole picture of things, and she kind of swooped in and helped me where I needed it. And so I feel very fortunate to have had that in my life at that time.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that is so important. Did you have overlap between Dorothy DeLay and Heidi Castleman?
No, no, no. Heidi Kassman taught at Eastman, so I did my master's there, and I switched to viola permanently, and I never played the violin again.
Oh, I see. What were some of your major turning points in your career, would you say?
Turning points is a hard word because I feel like you're suggesting that there are these pivotal moments in someone's life that define someone. And I would say there are important things that have happened to me in my life, in my journey, and I hope that will continue to happen. So I'll sort of go through it that way, like things that have sort of changed my thinking and encouraged me in a certain direction. And I would say my time with Heidi has been super important. I would say certain positions, like when I started at Aspen and when I started at Peabody, these were sort of bigger positions that allowed me to sort of step into my own and start discovering things about myself and about directions that I would like to go into even further. I listened to some of your other podcasts and, people had these turning points in their career, and I just I think that I don't live that way. I mean, I feel that I'm on a path and different things influence me and will continue to influence me, but I I hope that every day I'm sort of going further in a way that feels good to me and my direction.
Yeah, I love that mindset that you have. And the part of the reason I have this podcast is to show people that, not all careers are the same and not all people are the same. We have different, career trajectories and ways we go about being a musician. How did you first get into teaching and what made you realize you have a passion and a talent for it?
This is gonna sound silly, but when I was 5 and studying Suzuki, I really enjoyed it, and I remember distinctly going into my mother's walk-in closet with my violin and pretending not to play, but to teach.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's something that I have always loved to do. I feel it's a privilege, and I kind of am driven by sort of trying to understand how people think. So it's some people talk about it as some people have the teaching bug and some people don't, and I definitely do. Part of it could be too at Cincinnati when I described it was a very difficult time and I was trying to find my way. I really had to through this structure that was offered to me, I really had to figure out how to play the violin kind of on my own through this structure, and I feel that I've always had this mindset of, like, "How? What am I do" just taking things apart and trying to find ways to explain things to myself, but also to others.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. So, how did you first get involved in the Aspen Music Festival, which you've been teaching at for over 20 years, and then the Peabody Conservatory, which you're at now?
Well, going back to Heidi Castleman and her uniqueness as a person, she really helped set me off on my career. I think that, well, first I was her TA at Eastman, and I think she realized that I did have this incredible passion for teaching, And so she really guided me in my first few jobs, but also she dreamt up this team teaching situation at Aspen and invited me to join her. And really, I've been doing that ever since. And when you're at a big place like this where people can sort of recognize your name and there's a flow of students, it allows people to see your work, and it leads to other things, and eventually led me to Peabody.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, and then how did you end up at the Robert McDuffie Center for Strings as well?
Well, that was interesting. Remember when you were asking about my pivotal moments? One pivotal moment was having a child and having my priorities shift. And when my child I wouldn't envision having been able to do this McDuffie Center addition to my life with my child in my house. But it so happened that he went to college, and that's when Bobby McDuffie called me, and I was interested. And so I decided to try to add it to my schedule, and so far so good, knock on wood. I'm managing.
Yes, yes, very well. How would you say having a child impacted kind of your teaching and performing career?
Having a family definitely complicates your life, but I would say having a child maybe is the most important thing that I've done in my life, and thankfully, I'm a very deeply organized person. And so that allows me to structure my time well and do a lot of things, but it's very challenging to try to fit all of the important things in your life. Yeah, so I feel very fortunate that I was able to, but it can be chaotic, and it's again about priorities and making time for what is important and letting some things go.
Yeah. How did you develop your teaching philosophy over time?
I guess that it starts with your own experience with yourself. So, me trying to figure out how to play the violin and moved on to viola, maybe that's sort of underlying everything I'm doing. Well, I feel like I'm continuing to develop, I feel the needs of students have changed too over time, but I do think as I develop myself, my teaching has changed. I have to say that, like, 5 years ago, I was a different teacher, and for sure 20 years ago, I was different. And the more I know and the more I figure out, the more I put it into my teaching. So, I don't know, I feel like I'm not done. I'm constantly trying to be better, and it makes it really fun.
I think that's amazing. Someone esteemed professor as you are is still developing your teaching philosophy. And I think that's very important as well. How do you incorporate wellness into your teaching and your playing?
I would say the thing that I said earlier about when you play an instrument, it's so multifaceted, the areas that one needs to develop. Like, you need the intellectual piece, you need the physical piece, you need the emotional piece to fit in all. And I think it's kind of my job to sort of help whichever piece is missing or or support where the support is needed. So if someone has incredible tension, obviously it's going to be in the way of their playing. If someone is an emotional wreck, those are a little harder to deal with, but obviously that's gonna get in the way of really being great at your craft. So, it's kind of sort of seeing, again, the whole picture and helping where I can in whatever ways I can. That being said, in my own playing, I mean, any unnecessary tension is really debilitating to someone who plays a string instrument, for sure, and so it's something we all have to think about all the time, and through different things, Alexander technique or just exercise and understanding of my own body and all kinds of things, it's easy to think about that kind of stuff in relation to the instrument.
Mhm. Yeah. How have you balanced in your career performing and teaching together?
I would say I'm definitely a career teacher who plays. But I would say, like, my benefits and my salary and everything are from teaching, and the bulk of my days are from teaching, and then throughout the year, I have concerts and, I have a trio that I play with, and I do faculty things and stuff. So that's sort of the makeup of my life. And when you're teaching many, many hours a day, it is hard to balance the practicing. And again, I'm really organized and I get up really early and I fit a lot into a day. And you kind of do what you have to do. And if there's exciting things to play that I look forward to, I will just figure out how to fit that in.
Yeah. It's all about balance. How did you first get into the Aspen Trio? How did that happen?
I have these colleagues in Aspen every summer, and David Perry, Mike Mermigan, and I were friends from way back, and we played a bunch together, and we always loved it. And so we decided to try to make it happen during the year. The group actually started with 2 other people, and we were 5 people. Nadine Asen, a wonderful flutist, and Rita Sloan, a wonderful pianist. And then things got complicated and people were moving in different directions, and so we changed it to a trio, and we have a couple of tour periods a year, and we all have different jobs, so more than that would be sort of impossible to do. So it's kind of the perfect balance of something where we are extremely comfortable together, so there's this chemistry that you don't have with an ad hoc group that is lovely, and then, we get along really well, we have fun meals together, and it's a nice extra thing that I do that I enjoy.
Yeah. I would really love to, throughout my career, always be playing chamber music because it's so grounding and so fun to play with friends. You're at the Aspen Music Festival right now, and you've been teaching there for so long. What would you say is kind of a benefit or a reason why students should always try to go to music festivals?
Well, Aspen is long, um, but the benefit is that it feels like another semester,
Mm.
and, you know, talented kids develop a lot in the summer. Even though Aspen Music Festival can be very busy, it is an opportunity, 1, to work with a teacher that could be helpful to you, and 2, to just develop for another, 8 weeks. You get orchestra opportunity and chamber music opportunity, but if there's someone that you also really wanna work with, it can really change the way you approach your instrument. Usually, it's a different person from who you study with during the year. Not always the case, like, I bring my own students as well, but even though there's a lot going on here, it seems for the most part to be less distracting than college, than when you're
Mm.
actually in school. So that can be really helpful too, because maybe the academic piece is missing.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely learned so much from my time there. And especially with the teachers and just playing in the orchestra, learning so much rep, I found it very beneficial to me. So, something I wanted to talk about was in the classical music world, we're surrounded by competitions. We're auditioning for orchestra jobs, chamber music positions, and even competing in competitions or for spots in studios at the top conservatories. So, how do you kind of guide your students through having high goals and being really ambitious with staying kind of grounded and true to themselves and not developing destructive thoughts towards themselves or towards their colleagues that they're so-called like competing against?
Mhm. It's a very hard field, and it's this battle of what drives you, which is, I think, fundamental. So, like, intrinsic value in what you do versus extrinsic value. And I sent you this article that I loved, written by David Brooks, an opinion piece in the New York Times where he talks about it, very clearly. But I do feel like it can be a struggle because it's a very human thing to want. But in music, the driving force should be and has to be the need to be good for yourself.
Mm.
How many people do we know who have won major competitions and then don't develop and don't have a career that they want or win that dream job and then are not happy? I think that to be a musician, it's a blessing because we constantly are curious and want to be the best we can be. I mean, that's one of the things that attracts me to the field is that here, even now, I'm a lot older than you, and every day I wanna be better. And not all jobs work that way. It's a gift, but if that piece drives you, the rest falls into place. So, I mean, we all know how much hard work matters, but the piece of curiosity about the beauty of music and how to be good and how you need to live your life towards that goal, if that can be sort of front and center, you might go to this school, you might go to this school, you might win this competition, you might get this job. Eventually, that's what I was saying, referring to earlier in our conversation. Eventually, you will have a life with the things that you need in it. And sort of that journey, the process is something that is just helpful to embrace because that's what our life is. It's a process. And even though I happen to have a job that is very satisfying, I'm still trying to develop and go further.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Always continuing to grow, always striving for something better, to become something better inside. And I think that's really amazing. Another question I kind of had, something that I was thinking about after reading the article that you sent me, was there was one time in a lesson I was told I need to have more ego in my playing, as in I needed to present myself a little bit more. But in response to saying I need a little more ego in my playing, I was thinking, I was like, "Oh, I don't want to be arrogant, though. Like, I don't wanna come off as cocky or be that way to my peers." So how would you kind of guide your students through that?
Well, you've actually brought up a bunch of different topics, I think. I mean, I wasn't in the lesson, so I'm not exactly sure exactly what was behind it, but I would say that there is a performance aspect that is important so that you are communicating well to your audience. So that's one piece of what I'm hearing from you. Part 2 is you have to, as a musician, have a belief in what you're saying. And maybe that's another part to what your lesson was about, but both are sort of areas that need development. I think that the intellectual piece of knowing what you want to say about a piece of music includes phrasing, includes, the emotional connection or what the character, like all of that is an hugely important piece of your performance. And then there's actually the piece of getting up and playing in front of people and feeling confident in what you're presenting to people. And I think that I kind of feel like this is with all playing, but there are these pieces, and we need to develop all of them, including playing in tune, you know? And so whatever the missing piece is, like in your case, if you were my student and this comment was floating around in my head and I was thinking about these 2 pieces, I would say, "Well, you need to play for someone every day or just practice playing." And then the other piece I would check in with is, are you totally committed to how you're playing this? Do you believe in your phrasing? Do you believe in what you're trying to say about this piece of music? And see if that leads you to being more comfortable in performance.
That's amazing. Yes, something I definitely need to work on for sure.
All of us.
Yes. I think we can close out. So, what advice would you give to aspiring professional musicians?
It's hard to just sort of simplify, but I would say it's about the journey and trust the process of growth to get you where you need to go.
Yeah. You're so oriented towards growth, and it's something we all need to be thinking about because it can be easy to get stuck and, just kind of a little bit discouraged. But I love that you're always thinking about what comes next. So thank you so much for joining me today and for coming on my podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was a total pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck in your journey.
Thank you to Victoria Chiang for a thought provoking interview about how we can always strive to be better no matter what stage we are at in our careers. Her passion for teaching and mindset that she has towards music is so inspiring and a good reminder to all of us that the sky is the limit, especially in classical music. Thank you so much for joining me on Backstage Classical Career Conversations, and be sure to subscribe to the show and rate us on the platform you're using. To donate to the show to help us keep creating content, click on the support link in the description. I'm Katrina Stroud, and it was great to see you here. Until next time, stay inspired and listen to the stories of others.